struggle and difficulty is how you make it in life. It's really about looking at the patterns that we are, and our beliefs actually, that we're believing and then creating new ones.
Welcome to Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, the podcast where we embrace the beauty of finishing the things that we started. I'm your host, Stephanie Essery. I'm a writer who has spent decades creating stories that I never had the confidence to share with the world. I was convinced that I just wasn't good enough, or maybe it was just too late. Now at 54 years old, that's 42 years after writing my first story, I'm finally stepping into the world of publishing, and I want to take all of you along with me. Along the way, we're also going to be exploring the journeys and stories of others who thought they had missed their chance, but who ultimately found the strength to rewrite their future. We'll hear from experts who will help us navigate all of the changes, and I'll be sharing all of my own experiences, every triumph, every setback, and every lesson learned as I work towards becoming a debut author. Because I believe that the past does not define us, our next chapter does. So whether you're picking up the pen for the first time, or you're reclaiming a dream that you set aside a long time ago, you're not alone. We're going to be turning that page together. This is Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, because the story isn't over until we say it is. Hi, my friends. I'm thrilled to welcome Magali Mathieu, a former tech entrepreneur who left the fast-paced startup world to embrace a path of holistic healing and personal transformation. From burning out in the hustle culture to rediscovering her vitality, Magali has an incredible story to share about finding balance, purpose, and sustainable success. Magali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start with your journey. You spent years building up a tech startup, which I imagine came with its own set of challenges. What was that experience like, and what led you to realize that something needed to change?
Yeah, so in 2015, I moved to San Francisco to do a master's in social entrepreneurship. At the time, I really thought I was going to get in like the social impact world. I had worked in marketing before, but entrepreneurship is something that I always had my eye on. And during that master's, I met my two co-founders. And so one of them came with the idea of our company, and right away it was like around running and giving back and potentially building community. I was like, these are all things that I love. I was a big half marathon runner back then. And so we just started to get going. It was really nice to be in the comfort of grad school to just test a bunch of things out. But pretty quickly, we started not paying as much attention in lectures and like really building out this business. At first, it was super exciting. It was really fun. We understood really quickly that the business model and framework for actually building out a tech platform, because none of us were technical as the three co-founders, was going to need a lot of money, a lot of funding, and a business model that really works. And that's where I didn't ever think that I would be in sales, but pretty quickly ended up leading our sales and marketing strategies. And the application was a movement-based application for employee engagement. And so the idea is that companies would donate a certain amount of money to a cause, and their employees would get to unlock those funds by doing a bunch of different exercises. This was pre-pandemic. And then the pandemic happened. And I remember before that being like, I just want one day to wake up and have so many emails and so many people wanting our product. And then I remember it was around middle of March when things were starting to close down and companies started to freak out of how are we going to actually engage our employees? How are we going to continue to help them? We also back then had a different product doing virtual races for nonprofits and helping them raise money. So all of these big races that got canceled also needed a virtual option. And that was the beginning of my burnout. I woke up that day, we had like 300 requests or something crazy. We were a really small team back then. And obviously, with hindsight, we knew it was going to last much longer. We would have built a team and created a bunch of strategies. But that wasn't the case. And I was just working nonstop. And on the weekends, like, obviously, it was also a difficult time. But on the weekends, just feeling really low. I was at such high intensity that then when I was having a break, I just didn't know what to do with myself. My emotions were all over the place. And honestly, what I remember from that time is just being nonstop during the week and then crying on the weekends and being like, I can't keep going and keep doing this. But I always talk about the fact that burnout, yes, was like working too much. It was also no longer feeling in alignment with what I was actually doing. Because Yes, we were working for the well-being of employees, but we were building a type of company that I no longer as much resonated with. And I started really having a calling. And as I was in the startup, I started doing yoga teacher trainings and Reiki healing. And yeah, I started really understanding that there was something else. And my burnout was really like a mind, body, soul experience. I talked about the emotional piece. I was physically getting a lot of symptoms like insane bloating, a lot of gut health issues. And the doctors were telling me, like, you're fine, everything's good, there's nothing wrong. And then, yeah, and then from a mind perspective, just a lot of debilitating anxiety. Like, I had never understood what anxiety was until then. It was a big call to change some things up, which we can go into.
I know. So we talk a lot about the mind body connection and how when you experience overwhelm or stress or anxiety, whatever it is you may be feeling internally, if you don't take care of yourself, it can manifest itself in your physical well being, which is a big thing. But I know, I think I read you mentioned that your body, you knew your body was saying, yes, we need to change here, but it actually took you some time to make that actual leap. What was that ultimate deciding factor? You knew it had to happen. You mentioned the passion wasn't there anymore. And to be honest, that is as much a part of it, if not more, than than you want to work, obviously. But that passion has to be there, right? So once the body started experiencing those things, what was that big deciding factor? I've got to make a change now.
Yeah, it was actually November 2020. I got COVID and it was scary back then, right? This was like still really at the beginning of it. We didn't really know what it was. And I was pretty young, pretty healthy overall, and it hit me so hard. I got really sick. And I remember, I think it was 3 days in, lying in bed next to my partner and telling him, like, because I couldn't keep anything down, telling him, oh my gosh, I'm not bloated. And it was this really weird realization that I had been ignoring a really intense symptom that my body had been giving me. And it was when I was like, just, it was obviously related to some sort of digestion not happening. And that was a time where I was like, okay, I need to start finding a way out. And I want to first start working on myself and seeing if I can heal myself. I worked with a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, naturopaths, and FNTPs, functional practitioners, all of these things. But really, as I was like working on my physical health, I was starting to understand how much the emotional had an impact. And after starting to work with professionals and seeing, through journaling and working a little bit on understanding my symptoms, it was like, oh, I could have one thing one day and be perfectly fine on the weekend. And then I could have that same exact meal and have had 13 calls a day, which is what my days used to be like, and not be okay. So that was like, it was the little nudges. I had a lot of them, honestly, throughout the 6 years that I was there. But from that moment of getting COVID and realizing like my physical symptom was not there, that had been there probably for the last 4 years, that was a big wake up of, okay, something needs alignment and something's not okay. And it took me 2 years to leave. So from knowing that I needed to go, they teach you how to build a tech startup somewhat. People give you the tools, but people don't tell you how to leave. And when you have a really close relationship as co-founders and you've really built this thing and your 3 pillars, also I was the only woman. So knowing, that leadership would change and things would, as if you think of 3 pillars of a temple, when one pillar goes, like there's going to be big shifts. And so I remember needing to also be like, I need to be okay that if I leave, whatever happens and it's no longer like my responsibility and I trust whatever they're going to continue to do with it. But I needed to be okay with not being able to control anything that happened after that. And that took some time.
And I think you touched upon something there, that just the difficulty in making that decision, but also leaving is hard for a lot of people, whether it's leaving a real retail position or something they've built from the ground up. I think many of us feel responsible for things. We don't want to let people down, even though we know that our body is telling us something. And I think in a lot of ways, our body starts to try to force us to have these conversations before our minds are ready to admit there is a problem, right? And the more that you ignore it, the worse that situation is going to get until you're ultimately forced out. But what did those early days look like? You had those conversations, obviously, the hard conversations. I need to move on. What was your next step? Did you already have something in mind, or you knew you had needed to figure this out?
So by the time I was having all these feelings, I knew there was something else out there. Also, I knew I wanted to work with women. I knew coaching was something that I loved. And as a co-founder, like I built a team. Coaching and mentoring, a lot of those people came really naturally to me, and I would get that feedback. And it was like weirdly a known thing that some of our employees would be like, whenever you start coaching, like I'll be your first client. So in a weird way, I feel like everybody knew that I would go on to do something different at some point. I was also teaching yoga on the side. So I was getting a lot of experiences and understanding that yeah, healing is something that happened. But what really, like the call, if I can call it that, that happened is that, so my husband is from Ecuador, and we went to the Andes Mountains of Ecuador, and we did a temazcal, which is like a sweat lodge ceremony, with a shaman. And I thought I was like going into a sauna. And
I've heard some horror stories about those. You have to really be prepared for it physically and mentally, right?
I was not. And so to make it brief, they go through the 4 elements of the earth, fire, water, and air. And I remember during the water element, and you have a shaman who's guiding you, and it's just heat, but it's insane heat, and you're there between 2 to 4 hours. So it's really, heat does something to you that I didn't realize. And at one point in the water part, I was just crying, but letting everything out. And I remember it not necessarily being out of sadness, but it was just things needed to purge and let go. And then at the very end, so the heat is brought by these volcanic rocks that you put in a fire for hours before and then put them in. And they call these las abuelitas, or the grandmothers. And at the end, he was like, so ask the grandmothers if they have a message for you. And these things were still pretty new to me, but I very clearly heard, you're here to heal and to help others heal. And it was like, I was like, what? I actually physically, I think even said, what? Because I just didn't understand where it came from, what it was. And that was in 2018. So that was 2 years prior to like me having COVID and realizing I really needed to go. And yeah, there was just really this deep feeling of, I want to heal and I want to help others do the same.
Yeah, and I think sometimes those answers come in different ways, and we just really have to be open to receiving them. We know things need to change in our lives, and whether it's through illness or something like yourself you went through, you just have to be a little bit more open. And so now you focus on really helping people find that balance between ambition and well-being. And I know that we probably have a lot of high achievers that will listen as well, and they struggle with this. What are some of the key strategies for pursuing success without sacrificing your mental, physical, and the emotional health?
Yeah. So I think that first is really realizing that everything is holistic, right? And so if you are only going to be focusing on one thing out of, if you think of the different categories that you have of your life, so it might be like your home life, whether you're in a relationship, whether you have a family that you live with, also like your friendships, your social life, and then things like how are you taking care of your body? What are you drinking? Where are you eating? What are you doing? How much are you moving? And then the things of your work. What are you using your mind for? Do you feel aligned with that? And then all of the things of like your creativity, what are you putting out into the world outside of maybe work? When I looked at that for myself back then, it was basically work was my life. That's the only thing that was really happening. And I think it was also expected, and it's very much the startup tech culture. Whereas, so whenever I'm working with somebody and they're like, I'm so overwhelmed, this feels really difficult, I go back and there is really like the Wheel of Life is a really great exercise if you even look that up online. And I have one that I can also send you a link to actually that we can add in here. But it's really easy way to have a visual picture of, oh, wow, I'm only focusing on this one aspect of my life. And because we're whole beings, if we're only focusing on one part, we're not going to feel fulfilled, right? We're not going to feel happy. We're not going to feel joy. And whatever it is that we're focusing all of our energy on is going to start draining us. And so for anybody who's super ambitious, and don't get me wrong, I still am that way, it's possible to do all those things, and it's possible to spend time with friends and cook delicious foods and watch your favorite show. If you are doing something that's dedicating, or if you're dedicating 110% to only one thing, it's just not sustainable. It's not gonna long term. And that's the whole point of a startup culture, right? For somebody who's in that is, or even for I think people climbing up the ladder. The idea is that you're working so hard for a certain amount of time and then you'll be able to get to the next level. What I invite people to think about is like, what about right now? How can I feel fulfilled in the life that I have in this moment? Oh, I think you're muted.
Keep muting for coffee. I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation where work becomes life, right? You're either really ambitious and you're trying to make that next step, or you just feel like you're so needed you can't say no. When people ask certain things of you, you're willing to put in that extra work. And then before you know it, you're spending 80% of if it's your time, your physical time, or even when you're home. It's really hard to just turn that off when you get home. Why do you find that people find themselves in that situation and are reluctant to take a step to remove themselves from it?
I think it's the society and the culture that we're living in. And it's like the norm. And the norm is, yeah, we're not really happy at work, but we work to live or live to work. Like whatever, there's different ways of seeing it. And unfortunately, I think that we're in a culture where, and especially in this American culture, originally I'm French. And so I grew up in a very understanding what slow living is, understanding what taking 2-hour lunch breaks is, while still having a successful career. And I think a big part is because that's what the narrative that we're being fed. And it's actually really difficult to go against the grain and to be like, wait, let me pause. The other thing is we're bombarded by information and social media and the news, and there's a million things going on all the time that because somebody might be listening to this and be like, okay, cool, but I have a 9 to 5. I need to pay the bills. Like, I got to keep going. And I hear you. And what are you doing in those 5-minute breaks? Like in between calls or when you're, going to get a coffee or water or going to the restroom, are you getting on your phone right away? Are you scrolling? Are you trying to like numb and get out as opposed to maybe I have this doctor that I follow that I love. He puts out weights next to his coffee machine, and it takes 4 minutes for him to wait for his coffee. And he does a 4-minute weight workout every single morning doing like waiting for his coffee. And I think that's brilliant. It's, how can we make these little moments, because I understand that it's difficult for people to just up and change their life completely, to actually nourish us and be like, ooh, this was really helpful, as opposed to kind of numb and go away from it, and therefore be less attuned to what our body is telling us.
So I was going to ask, what are some of the misconceptions about balance? And the more I think about it, I think people, if you were to ask them if they live a balanced life, most people will want to say, yes, I do. I work this number of hours and I come home, spend time with my family, and I go to the movies or go do this. And I think what we may find is that most people aren't as balanced as they believe they are. Is that your experience?
Yes, 100%. And that's really that circle of life exercise I keep going back to is one of the first ones that I do with my clients, because it's such a helpful way for people to be like, ooh, visually to see how much they're dedicating to other parts of their lives. And I also think when thinking about living a balanced life, it might be different for everybody. Depending on your age, again, do you have kids? Obviously, balance is going to look very different for you than if you don't.
That looked a lot different when my kids were all young than it
Yeah,
does now.
for sure. And so it depends on the moment of life you're in. And it's important to look at what balance means for you. And I think it's okay if I feel like the scale is leaning a little bit more one way or the other. What's just like one small thing that I can do day to day that's going to help tip it the other direction over time? I think that one thing I really don't appreciate in today's information health space is that it can be a place for a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and feeling like we're not doing enough. And it's really about, okay, am I first of all satisfied with the way that my life looks? And if I'm not, what choices do I have? What are the ways that I can make a difference? Because I think going back to what you were saying at the very beginning of people might be resistant to change and to leave, yeah, it's really scary to do something that we don't know, that the impact that it's going to have. And sometimes it's scarier to think that we're not going to move for the next 5 to 10 years. Think about that. What actually that's going to accumulate to in terms of how you're going to feel about yourself, about the world. And so, really thinking, okay, in the grand scheme of things, if I look at my life, what am I dissatisfied? What's the thing I'm the most dissatisfied about? And what is one small thing that I can do to improve it?
And I agree with that. I remember my husband and I got married very young, and we were in college when we got married. And so we ended up having children right away, our oldest two right away. So I left school and went into real estate. My husband kept on his journey of finishing school. Ultimately, he got a job that did not require him to finish his degree. But then he reached a point in his life after his dad passed. My husband was 28. He's just a couple of years from finishing my degree, and I really need to be able to finish that. And so sitting down and making that decision, and something that kind of stuck with me is what he said was that the next 2, 3 years are going to pass regardless. What can we do at that time? We either struggle for 3 years or we struggle for the rest of our lives. Those are decisions that you need to make. And so I think when people are faced with that, we need to make a change. But that change is going to be really hard, and it's maybe going to disrupt our lives a little bit. And I think people probably need to dig a little bit deeper and look at their lives maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now. If you don't make that change, what is it going to look like? Are you going to get sick? Or are you going to be at a point in your life where you know that emotionally you may not be okay because what you're doing now is already having an impact on you, both mentally and physically? And so when you're working with people that are struggling with making that decision, what is the discussion that you have, or some of the strategies that you try to get them to implement to make that first step, to be able to make that change?
Yeah. So first we really look at, okay, if I don't change anything, where am I going? Because a lot of people feel stuck, but they don't actually realize that all the choices that they're making is directing them a certain direction, right? So we look at that, like, where am I going? And I love some of the things you just said. And I often say, if you change nothing, nothing changes. And then once it's okay, we do want to make a change, where is it that we want to go? And an exercise that I love is picturing your dream life. Simply picturing a day in your life. And so I usually guide people through this. It takes a while, so we don't have to do it now. But just the first part is really closing your eyes, picturing as if there is no amount of or no limit to any resources, to locations, to if your best friends live in different places, they can live with you. Just really zero limitation, and walking through with your eyes closed your ideal perfect day. And we go through every single part. So opening your eyes, where are you? Who's with you? What do you smell? What do you see? What does the place that you're in look like? And then what's the ritual that you have in the morning? Where do you go? What are the things that you eat? Who do you interact with? Where do you get your gratification from? What are you feeling grateful for throughout the day? We really connect to the feeling. And something that in my work is really important is the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And he's really talked about how we can make changes if we connect to the future in terms of what it's going to feel like versus continuing to live our life with the emotions of the past. Because as humans, that's what we're naturally going to do. We're just going to keep going in what we know. And so getting into the unknown is hard to imagine, but we're super creative, imaginative beings. So if we just do that little exercise and really connect to what it feels like, I often ask then at the end of that exercise, my clients to give me like a few words or just one word of what that feeling feels like. And that's something that we always come back to. And doing little practices. When you have 5 minutes, just close your eyes and remember what that feeling feels like. You can place your hands on your heart and feel that. That's going to what's continue to drive us to actually make choices so that we build habits that create this new reality.
So do you have people that they go through this exercise with you, right? And they're experiencing that ultimate life, that goal that they want to achieve at the end of it. They're dreaming big and thinking big, whether that's to, I don't know, own their own island or whatever that may be. Do you find people resistant to that idea? Because I know even when I've done a little bit of kind of that exercise myself, what do I want the end of my life to look like? I always look at it from that perspective. When I've reached the end of my life and I'm looking back at what I've accomplished, what do I want that to have to look like? And I know I've gotten in my own way when I feel like the dreams that I have or the things that I want are too big. So, how do you dig into the reasons why, when that person's so resistant, they've dreamt the big dreams, they know what they want to achieve, but they are too scared or they think that it's just too far out of their reach, that none of this is going to help?
Yeah, that's when the good stuff starts to come out. The things that you really understand are not allowing us to get to that next level. And so usually that's where we understand what are the limiting beliefs that are stopping us. Is it that we grew up in scarcity and so we don't actually believe that we can earn a lot of money if that lifestyle requires that? Is it that we don't feel worthy and we don't feel like we're worthy of deserving something that we're really happy about because we learned growing up that struggle and difficulty is how you make it in life? It's really about looking at the patterns that we are and our beliefs actually that we're believing and then creating new ones. So breaking every single one of those down and rewriting them. So let's say it's, I'm not worthy of being happy, then it's okay. I am worthy of being my happiest self. And then all of these different affirmations that we create together, I invite my clients to write them everywhere, make them their passwords on whatever they're using on their phone, etc., so that they can really start to feel into that. But more than anything, it's connecting again to that feeling. And it's a process, right? So as we start changing, things are going to start feeling really uncomfortable because, as we said, if nothing changes, then nothing is going to change. And if we change nothing, then nothing is going to change. So then once we start changing, some things are going to feel really uncomfortable. People around us are going to be like, let's say we start setting boundaries around people we haven't in a long time. They're going to start not liking that and asking us and being like, what? You're changing. This is weird. And I always say, that is the best sign that you're going towards the life that you actually want when people around you are noticing. Or it might just be like, oh, wow, you have so much energy lately. Like, where is that coming from? But the resistance is what's going to keep helping us grow to get to that next level. And I've experienced that in my own life. When I was going through a lot of that bloating journey, I would do these meditations and then open my eyes and literally look down and be like, is it gone yet? And it's a process, right? The idea is like continuing to connect to that faith and to that belief that it can change. And as a result, making different choices day to day. It's not going to happen overnight. And that's why also I think it's helpful to work with somebody. I'm a coach, but I have my own coaches, right? Because I'm still growing and developing different things and understanding. So yeah, I think it's helpful to have somebody that can also guide you through it and remind you to keep going.
And there's a reason that many psychologists have their own psychologist because they have to work through these things, right? And I think too, one way that people get in their own way, I know that I have as well, is self-sabotaging. You talked about that where it's not comfortable. And maybe if you've experienced pain in your life or trauma, it's very easy to feel uncomfortable with happiness. Like it just feels foreign, even though you want that. Obviously, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to have a life that's fulfilled and full. But because that feeling may be so foreign to them, they revert back to what's comfortable or at least what they know. And that's to be uncomfortable, be unhappy, and just not move forward with it. So, what are some of those things that people can do on a daily basis? You mentioned like affirmations or perhaps even keeping a journal. Are there other strategies that they can use on a daily basis as they're working through this?
Yeah, a simple strategy is every morning asking yourself, who do I want to be today? Just getting out of bed and asking ourselves, who do I want to be today? And then working that out with yourself, whatever that means, and the way that you want to behave, the people you want to interact with, all those things. And then at the end of the day, asking yourself, okay, what could I have done better today? And where did I do great today? And it's a really simple exercise, but it helps us understand, first of all, it sets an intention for the day as opposed to being in reactive mode. And then an opportunity literally every single day to look back and say, okay, these are the things, even though my intention was to be this way, I let my familiar self take over in this moment and I wasn't able to stop that. But then on the other hand, I was really able to act in alignment with who I want to be in this way. I think what to get from that message, right? Because journaling, meditation, going on a walk, not being on social media, like there's so many things that you could do. The importance is making sure that you know who it is that you want to be, setting out an intention to be that person, and then giving yourself feedback. And this is where I really believe that everybody should have, whether it's a psychologist, a coach, somebody helping them along. Because if you think about it, at work, you get feedback. People let you know, hey, you did great on this. You didn't do so well on this. Everybody should have that within their life to understand and to be able to grow and improve and again, know that you are in the driver's seat, that it's a choice. And the other small exercise that I really love that's a journaling practice is Morning Pages by the woman who wrote The Artist Way, Julia. I'm not remembering her last name right now. The reason I love this exercise is because she says the first 45 minutes, write everything that you're thinking in your head. And then she helps you to understand if there's a pattern in your story. And then she tells you, if you keep telling us the same story, you're going to get really bored of that story. And that's where people realize they might have, I don't know, addictions. They might be victimizing themselves, all of these different really deep things that we're not realizing are happening. Somebody needs to shed light on them. And there's so many tools, but those are just some that can help people get started.
I think that is a benefit to finding somebody to work with you, right? Because oftentimes, even when we're doing those exercises, we can still get in our own way where everything feels so overwhelming. And then we just don't know if we can make it through. And so having somebody there that can hold us accountable and also give us a little swift kick. I know I've had many coaches through the years, and I believe so strongly in having someone else walk beside you, especially someone who's been through it and they know the steps that needed to be taken in order to get to where they needed to be. And I know you've given us a lot of little habits and everything here in regards to maybe getting stuck, but do those same things apply when we're talking about maintaining balance in your life? Or are there practices or habits that people specifically need to take in order to maintain that balance? Because it is really difficult because sometimes work will pull us back in when we know that we shouldn't be doing this, or a relative asks us for a favor and we're doing things that we probably should have said no to. How do you keep that balance?
Yeah, so there are two things that for me are non-negotiables. One is a daily walk. It doesn't matter. I'm very lucky that I live in California and that it's warm and sunny. And whenever I'm in Europe in the winter and it's freezing cold, I still do it. Going on a walk, moving your body, getting fresh air, regardless of, it's something that is so powerful. It helps us let go of anxiety. It just brings a lot of, we say emotion is energy in motion. And so sometimes when we're feeling overwhelmed, just the best thing we can do is move our body and get into action rather than sit and scroll on social. And then the other thing is Dr. Gabor Mate is another doctor that I absolutely love. He wrote this book called When the Body Says No, and another one more recently around this toxic culture that we're living in. In that new book, there is a little exercise. It's 5 questions to set boundaries with yourself. And it's something to do weekly. And the questions are something like, what did I not say no to this week? By not saying no to that, what am I not saying yes to? And it really helps us understand. And for me, this is where the key to balance is, because I tend to be a giver. And not only is my work being there for others, but I have that. It's how I was raised. It's how I've always been with my friends. And it's really important for me to do that little check-in to be like, ooh, I said yes to this person when really I wanted to say no. And it wasn't to hurt their feelings, but it was because I needed to fill my cup. And I know that once I fill my cup, I'll be such better company and will have a much better time, and I'll be able to be there for them in a better way. So those are two things for me in keeping balance. And then I try to have a pretty healthy lifestyle in terms of what I eat. The last thing I will say, and I think it's really important for living a balanced lifestyle, is also giving yourself grace and loving yourself for where you're at, acknowledging yourself for the fact that you're trying, and that every week is going to look a little different. Every day is going to be different. If, you're dealing with something really difficult emotionally and you are like, okay, I'm going to go and eat that tub of ice cream, like whatever those things are that you might then be feeling really guilty and shame around, maybe just pause before you're going to do that and be like, you know what? I'm going to actually go do that because it's what I need right now and it's okay. And if it was my best friend or my daughter or whoever telling me that they were going to do that, I would invite them with open arms to help themselves soothe. And that's also balance. Yeah.
So one of the things is burnout. Like a lot of those things are signs of burnout. And I think the vast majority of us do a really poor job of recognizing when we're starting to get burnt out. And so what are some of the things, the signs that we need to look for, to know that we're reaching that we are either burnt out or we're well on the way there? And what are some of those steps that we can take to recover from it pretty quickly?
Yeah. So the number one thing is not being excited about things you used to be excited about. Let's say a really good friend of yours texts you to go out for dinner and that used to really light you up and you're like, ugh, I have no desire to have that or to do that. Fatigue, anxiety, reliance on caffeine or anything else to help you sleep. This notion of being wired but tired is a big sign of burnout, that you feel like you're a wired machine you can't switch off, but you're also yawning all the time and feeling exhausted. And emotional overwhelm is a big sign of burnout. Yeah, those are the ones that are coming off on the top of my head right now. In terms of what you can do about it, it's really giving yourself these little breaks of things that are going to nourish you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever that looks like for you. So whether it's taking 5 minutes break in between calls, whether it's like making sure you drink a big glass of water before having your coffee, whether it's reaching out and getting help, resting. And so a lot of our circadian rhythm is a really important piece of us feeling really rested. And first thing in the morning, within the first 20 minutes, trying to get direct sunlight. That means going outside, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And even if it's cloudy, just getting that natural bright light is going to help us wake up and help our hormones that are going to go up and down throughout the day to help us then go to sleep. Around 2 hours before bedtime, can we not be on screens, or can we utilize red light as a way to mimic that sunset? Or if you have to be on screen, can we wear blue light glasses? There's so many different tools out there nowadays. But yeah, your circadian rhythm is one that I would really focus on. The other is caffeine intake. If you're really burnt out, I know that I would have 3 to 4 coffees minimum in my burnout days. And cutting back was really important. And I still drink coffee daily now, and it helps me and I feel great about it. But can you at least have breakfast and wait 30 minutes to have your coffee? First of all, your digestion is going to feel so much better. And then it just lets, again, those hormones be able to really naturally wake you up. And then if you need a little bit of a boost, do that after. Some other things are communicating to people around you that you're really tired, that you need support. There are so many ways in which just like voicing things out really helps us understand that's actually what we're going through. Journaling is a beautiful way to do that, connecting back to gratitude, and whether it's before bed or first thing when you wake up, thinking about 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for, and not just the thing you're grateful for, but why. Again, what's the emotion behind why you're grateful about this thing? And then, so you said, what are tools to get over burnout pretty quickly? I would encourage you to look at this as a journey that's going to be maybe a little bit longer than you'd like, but for that journey to be sustainable. And my burnout started, in 2020. We're now in 2025. And it's like about a year ago that I really started feeling, oh my gosh, I have way more energy than I have had for the last few years. And I still built my new business and all the things. But I didn't just take a year off to do nothing. And I think that's a lot of the reality for a lot of people. And so know that it's just going to take time. Just take more time to rest. And in thinking about rest, I actually love to thinking about restoration. So like, how can you restore your body? The day that if you like run a marathon, then the next day you're not going to run and you're going to just maybe sit in an Epsom salt bath. What is the version of that for your mind, your body, and your soul in this burnout state that you're in right now?
Yeah, and it's definitely a work in progress, right? It's something that we always have to come back to as well. Even if we think that we've got it all together and all figured out, there's going to be moments in your life where everything's going great and then you get burnt out again. And everything's going great and then everything falls out of balance. And so it's important that you learn these tools, but also that you utilize them when they need to be, when you need to make those changes. And so you have a coaching program that's coming up that's launching or that has launched this January. Can you tell us more about that and how that really is going to help people create sustainable growth both in their professional and personal lives?
Yeah, so my group coaching program is called Vitalize, and it is specifically for women who are in transitional phases of their lives. And it basically every week, so it's 12 weeks, and every week there are modules on mind, body, and soul. So, mind, everything mindset related that we talked about, body, things like are you getting enough protein, how to process stress within your body, blood sugar balance, all those things. And then the soul aspect is actually where business modules come out because it's really connecting to the gifts that your soul was meant to be bringing out into this world and helping you creating whether it's a passion project or actually a business and making it sustainable for yourself. When I left my startup, I was like, I'm done with the corporate world. I'm done with business. And I went completely the holistic route. And then a few years ago, the pendulum swung back in the middle like it usually does. And I was like, I love business and I love helping women build their businesses and connect to their passions and make it a reality. And so that's what we do. And it's a group coaching because it's so much more powerful to heal together. And some of these women are coming out of burnout, but some of them are feeling like they're drained in their 9 to 5 and they want a next step, but they don't necessarily know where to go and how to even start with that. And it's beautiful to see them helping each other through the process. So yeah, and I run it about every 3 months.
Perfect. Thank you for that. How can they connect with you? One thing I want to do before we wrap up is I always ask everybody if you could give one key message to our listeners, what would that be? What little piece of advice could they go ahead and start implementing today? And also where, of course, they can connect with you to get all of that information that you just provided.
Yeah, so we talked about a lot of tips, but I think if I was to leave you with one, it would be really connecting to what are you grateful for, what abundance is already in your life, and really connecting to the emotion as to how it helps you feel more joy, more peace, just more gratitude in your day-to-day. And just connecting with that is going to bring even more abundance and gratitude throughout your day. But you can find me on Instagram is where I'm pretty active. I'm at Magali on a Journey. I'm sure we'll add the link in here to make it easier for you. I also have my website, which is magalionajourney.com, and a podcast called Unlock Your Vitality with Magali on a Journey. So yeah, those are the places where I hang out most.
Thank you so much. And yes, we're going to have all that information on our show notes, and you'll also be able to have links that are going to lead you from our website directly to be able to connect with Magali. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and being able to share all these wonderful tips and also just your own personal journey as well.
Thank you so much.
Perfect. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Essery, and I'm encouraging you to embrace your worth, prioritize yourself, and keep writing your story. Stay inspired, and we hope to see you next time. Remember, your story isn't over, it's just waiting for you to turn the page. Thank you for joining us, and if today's episode inspired you, I would love for you to subscribe and leave us a review. It'll help more people find the show and reminds us all that it's never too late to begin again. And if you're ready to step into your next chapter, you don't have to do it alone. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and most of all, keep believing. Until next time, this is Unfinished Stories Next Chapter, because the best stories are the ones that we're brave enough to finish.